Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. It's been probably around 3 weeks since you last heard from us, since there was that little additional break in between the Stage 4 major and the beginning of Stage 5 due to the 4th of July weekend. So I do hope all of you that live, I guess, inside of the United States had a wonderful Independence Day. Everywhere else, I just hope you guys had a good weekend. But we'll be recapping the results from the Stage 4 Major and then jumping in to our predictions for the first week of Stage 5, the final stage before Champs. So kicking it off into the Stage 4 Major, the first matchup that we did see on that Thursday was the London Royal Ravens up against the Seattle Surge. And this was a prediction that I believe both you and I got correct. Actually, wait, I didn't get your predictions. I had Salvation's Elite for that. So you can tell me if you got these right or wrong
What? I
as
miss
we go through
Josh.
them. You missed Josh. He was wonderful enough to fill in last minute
Hey,
for
you
that
know what?
broadcast.
I appreciate Josh filling in. That was unfortunate that our recording didn't happen and that other technical difficulties thanks to OBS.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that I would have taken away from the London side of things was that while they did look okay, Seattle looked vicious on land the whole time. So you know, I feel like London's kind of chalked it at this point, and they're just. If I was London, I would probably just try to find more UK Challengers players and get them some notoriety, so that way you can continue to build your brand for the years to come. Um,
Yeah, they definitely I think have a good start there with Afro,
yeah,
since he's obviously been a big name. He hasn't been performing insanely well, but he hasn't been performing, I think, under expectations, which is good for him, especially since he came into the team relatively recently. I think he's been performing quite well for doing so. The interesting thing, though, with after London losing to the Seattle Surge was, I believe, there's been some talk about maybe Zed coming back into the lineup, which was definitely when they looked their best.
yeah,
However, it's kind of a bit too late for them to realistically make a run for champs since the point gap is just a bit too wide and some of the other teams are just gap be closed. However, I think looking towards how you want your roster to line up for next year, and then obviously you can put that idea to test here in the closing stage.
yeah, absolutely. I think that like anything that London does right now is not pointless, but they have to think about the things that they can do to like recoup their losses. And the biggest things in my mind are content creation and social media, which their social media guy Petter is he's good. Um, but um, their content creation, I mean, I haven't seen a single London Royal Ravens YouTube video pop up. So I don't know what's going on there. Um, and you got to get the players to just show up. That's really all you got to do. Come up with some neat little video ideas, get your props, get a nice camera, get some lighting, and then just have the players show up. It's not hard. Other teams do it a lot, and there's a reason why they do it. But if you're going to ride off of the momentum of being a European team and you're going to hope that that carries you for a fan base, you're sorely mistaken in a predominantly North American uh, esport. So I just London. We've said it for like the whole year. London's chalked. Um, and I mean, best of luck to them in future CODs. Hopefully they come back and do well in World War II, Vanguard. But um, I just, yeah, I mean, I wasn't really surprised. I was more surprised at how well Seattle did versus how poorly London did, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it'll be more interesting to see how this London team evolves in the off season, kind of what players they decide to keep moving into the new title. And I do hope that they keep Afro and that they try and look at maybe bringing in some more young talent, at least to foster their total roster, maybe not their starting roster, but to at least have those options there for them. Since I think that was probably one of the annoyances for me, at least with a bunch of these rosters, was they only had 4 players. They maybe had like one sub. London, obviously, their substitute. It took them forever to get them in because of visa issues with COVID and everything. But just see roster changes and maybe is like what I would prefer to see. It's they have like that player on the roster and they don't need to do all these 2-week random contracts and have all these players moving in and out that aren't accustomed to their environment that they've built and kind of that the coaches have helped built within the team.
Yeah, for sure. And
Stable of a performance.
you have, like I said, you have to focus on where, like, what's the next step, and not focus on the fact that you're not going to go to champs. The season's ruined for you. Like, there's literally
Yeah.
no point to play any of the games from here on out, other than for, so that you're not 12th place.
Yeah.
So
And
it's just a bad position for any of the bottom 4 teams to be in right now, and it's already late enough in the season that we kind of have an understanding of who those teams are. So,
yeah. And kind of that discussion of a bunch of roster changes and not having a large enough bench of players to bring in and out and be accustomed to the team environment brings us to the discussion of LA Thieves, who I think at this point have made the most roster changes in the CDL. And and consistent and varying performances throughout the season is a great reminder of that. And probably one of the biggest talking points of this stage 4 major was the extreme disappointment and irritability out of Hook.
yeah, like,
I guess not. It wasn't even going in. It was like at the major, really. Like they had the players there. Luckily, they had their substitute player there in Draza. And this, like, we've defended Hook, I think, quite a lot on this show. It's a player saying that he was like the only roster change that we couldn't come up with a reasoning behind it. And now you just have this clear irresponsibility on his part of not getting his COVID test, not taking like not even stay here. And so for people who don't know the story, like pretty much all the players they had to get tested like 3 days or something like prior to the event. And he failed to do that, and then he was hoping to just get his take to be able to play. Um, but he didn't bring his ID. He misspelled his name on like the online form to do so, and then he even showed up like 30 minutes late or whatever to the venue to practice with his team.
yeah, just
And so,
a bunch of just stupid stuff, really. I mean, like, it just blows my mind that you were a professional in the scene and you can't even do the registration stuff. That's really what this is. Like, COVID is not going away. The stuff is going to be around for quite some time, as new updates come with it. And you just gotta, as a professional, you have to realize I need to check all the boxes before I can perform. The officials aren't there to hold my hand and make sure, oh, well, who gets to play regardless, whatever he does. Like, it's just, it blows my mind that there's such a organizational, like, there's such an organizational, I don't even know. I don't even like calling it organizational because it's not like that would be ironic calling it, or that would be improper to call it that. It's completely dysfunctional, and Hook has shown that time and time again. And the more news that comes out with personal stories from Dallas Empire. I know Crim6 was saying that like he was about to crash his Porsche and like traffic trying to get a hold of of Kyler and everything like that. I mean, like it just seems right now that Hook might have actually been a a bad. He's probably just a prima donna right now. That's really what this reminds me of. Can't even do the stupid COVID test. Can't even show up the night before to do it. Like, it's not like he's super far away. They had this in Texas. You know,
Yeah.
what what the hell? What the hell are you supposed to do, man? Like, just the bare minimum. Spit in a little test tube like the rest of us, and make sure you aren't positive with COVID, and then you can just play. That's it. That's literally it. And the fact that not only once but twice he fails to show up on time, and the second time he misspells his name wrong, which is just funny in all things. Um, it's just it's a slap in the face to the amount of money that the thieves are paying him. It's a slap in the face to the CDL, who's just trying to put on a good show. And now the ironic part is you put your teammates in a bad position to go in with a sub minutes before the game is supposed to start, and then you get bodied by LAG, who suck. Like, I don't know. It was a terrible major stage. Hopefully they can turn it around and figure this out. They're not out of playoff contention yet. They're not out of champs.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, they're one of the teams that is more than likely confirmed since I believe they're currently seventh
yeah,
overall in the standings with a really sizable point gap between them and the ninth place team. So they're pretty much guaranteed for champs, but I mean, they're not looking too good based on their scrims with FaZe or whatever. Like Abizi said, they've been looking like shit. And we'll talk about the roster change quite soon. But obviously, huge irresponsibility. I definitely don't want to shift the blame to Mud Dog, since like
no.
you tell your player, hey, do this, you would expect them to be able to complete that task, since it is incredibly. But like for me, I know I've had to deal with this as a manager of a team, of constantly reminding players, hey, you have to do this, hey, you have to do this, hey, you have to do this before like a specific deadline. And when it gets extremely close to that deadline, uh, I'm out of town, but if I was in town, I would literally be driving over to their place and forcing them to do it, just standing behind them in person to have them do it online. Or in this case, I would have, if I was Mud Dog, I would have driven over to Hooks, yoinked him out of his place, and forced him to go to whatever site he needed to get this testing done. And I think where if after what do you do? It shouldn't need to be that way, but the issue with a lot of esports players is that they are incredibly irresponsible
Yes.
and do not value other people's time.
Turns out, in order to get really good at an esport, you have to like be really irresponsible with your well-being and your ability to do anything else except play the damn video game. So,
That's a myth, and I that's one. I mean, you moving conversation to like collegiate esports, but that's one of the Clerky's big talking points is you get a bunch of these players that have never had to do anything in their life, and collegiate esports really helps them develop as a person
right.
and as a player. So that's one of the benefits
Yeah,
of collegiate
and I'm
esports,
not
because you
saying
get a lot of these people that are like, oh, I don't know how to run a dishwasher, I don't know how to do the laundry. Like, what the hell?
yeah, but like, how old is Kyler right now? He's like 19, right? He's young.
No, he's 21,
Eh,
22.
Still, like, I mean, the kid has been a professional Call of Duty player for his entire like quote unquote adult life, and
Yep,
Team Indy has taken care of him and made sure that all of the stuff is good to go. It really is an unfortunate situation, and I hope that there's a lot of lessons learned from this. This has been a tough time in Hook's life for a lot of different reasons, and this is just kind of one of those like, well, you kind of get what you deserve. Like this is one of those like, all right, come on, man. Like this is what consequences look like in the adult real world. You kind of screwed over your team. You bowed out in losers round one, like a bunch of chumps, to LA Gorillas, and it's just, and it's not like the rest of the guys played bad. Honestly, I mean,
No, they did make it to a game five. It was just that they weren't able to come together in their S&D, obviously, because the respawns honestly weren't all that close.
no,
They obviously, I think they lost the control, won both the hard points, I think, something along those lines, and the S&D and the control. I guess you would say those are the modes that are harder for a team that like this core four. They haven't played together ever, I think, outside of when they were a 5-man for Modern Warfare, like last season. You haven't had these four playing together since then. So it's hard to kind of come together and make something happen on such short notice. And this this did lead to a roster change. Both Hook and TJ are actually out of the roster. They brought in John, and they are keeping Draza. I think keeping Draza on the team, fantastic
yeah, smart
idea.
move.
That he's been insanely good. Bringing in John, that's going to be a bit of a wild card. Obviously, John has an extremely high. He's won, at least he's won a world championship and got second at another. Don't He doesn't have two rings. Yeah, he only has one. He has the one from BO3. So he has had success with Slasher in the past, and but he hasn't been dominating in challengers. And so it will be interesting to see John come into this roster and how they can perform. And currently, at least based on, they've been playing like shit. So
Yeah.
like, you've made all these roster changes. You're making a roster change going into the stage 5. It's the last stage. You really don't want to be doing that unless you like have no other choice. And they currently not really early on into this team's core 4, but like you aren't, your spot's pretty much secured for champs. So now realistically all you have to do is get up to champs level to actually try make and potentially win, which, as scary as they are, and Toronto Ultra still looking consistent, and new threats like the Dallas Empire coming up.
So
But what is your opinion on, I guess, on this 100T roster?
so let's talk a little bit more about John. Now that I have his Gamepedia pulled up, so John, obviously LG guy for years, right? Champs 2018, CWL Vegas 2019. Um, you know, played in 2019 for a little bit, and during the CDL he never got picked up. I don't know what happened, but he grinded challengers for a while. This year alone, he's had 3 first place finishes in one of them was a Challengers Elite Stage 2 with Easter. He's been on Easter the whole time. Um, so in March he got a first place in and a second place. In April he got a fifth, a sixth, and a second. In May he got a second, a first, and a first. And in June he's hit seventh and eighth with Easter. So he's been a T8 Challengers Elite player for the Cold War season. So it's not like he doesn't have it, and he's been playing with some of the pros who have been fluttering in and out of the CDL, like Fellow and Venom and Jerd, and these guys that they've had opportunities in the league, and they are proven pro-am players. So knowing all of this, I really think that John might just be the answer. I don't think that. I think that they just need to get serious now, and Slasher and John will both be able to say, "All right, this is how we win tournaments. This is how we won back in the day. Whenever there were hundreds of teams, now that there's only 12, we only have to focus on like different things." And they're both really smart guys. Um, Kenny is he finds the one thing that he needs to do, and he can do it well. And he's not a bad main AR. He's not he's not even top five in my opinion in the league, but he's not a bad main AR. And Draza is kind of a wonder kid, right? I personally liked Draza better than Tej and Venom. I didn't like him better than Hook, but I like him better than Hook because at least he can do his stupid COVID test. He can spell his name right, you know. So so the Thieves look. I know we've said this a couple of times on the show, but the Thieves actually look kind of good right now.
Yeah, I think that's like the issue is like on paper, a lot of the rosters have looked good if you're just looking at name. However, they just aren't able to come together for some reason. And this one, honestly, it feels a bit weird to me. You have Draza, who's a really good flex, but then you have two main ARs. You have Kenny and you have Slasher. Kenny is realistically why they did Slasher early on, or maybe it was because of Slasher's mindset or whatnot early on into the season. But you still have two main ARs that like aren't going to be that great with the AK, and then you have Draza. I guess he's going to be the full-time SMG or something because you can't have two main ARs and a flex and then one main sub. So the roster right now just feels kind of weird to me, in my opinion. Obviously, Slasher, he's been performing really good, at least stat-wise, but obviously stats aren't everything in a team, as we've kind of seen with some of the roster changes this season. So it'll just be interesting to see how this like ninth or 10th iteration of the 100 Thieves roster can finally, if they can finally perform up to expectations, I guess. Because hello,
yeah, you just broke up real bad there.
I did.
Yeah, it was an
Did you
L.
catch?
I saw. I like we started talking about like I finished up my thought with the LA Thieves roster and said it would look good, and then you started to say like that was the general consensus, and on paper they've looked really good before, um, and then after that it kind of cut out.
Okay.
But I mean, like I think that we've kind of exhausted the Thieves topic already, so it's not like
Yeah.
I'm I feel comfortable moving on to somebody other than the team that can't even spell their name right. So
Okay. Well, we'll move on then to our next Thursday matchup. It was the Dallas Empire going up against the Optic Chicago lineup, and Dallas a 3-0 swept Chicago. I did not expect that. I thought Chicago was going to beat Dallas
no.
well at this event. They made it all the way to the finals. They pushed Atlanta probably the hardest they've been tested, I guess, all season outside of that like stage 2 loss to the Toronto Ultra.
Yeah.
They like all the gears, I guess, finally clicked. And I think the story of that is you could kind of see that occurring throughout stage 4 where they bring in Vivid, they're dog shit. Like they're not doing well at all. The next week, but it's off the back of Shotzi, who's just rounds the week before the major or whatever. Shotzi still performing insanely well. And then you have Vivid performing a little bit better, and Crim6 is doing well. And it's just kind of Illy that's being inconsistent. Shotzi's performing great. Vivid levels of performance, I guess, from like his LAG days. Crim6 is doing well, and Illy's finally at like an acceptable benchmark level for what we've expected out of him as a player. And that's kind of all you really needed for them to look like a really scary team. You got Shotzi doing his job real, you have Vivid going off, you have Crim6 doing well, and you got Illy performing well. And if that's kind of the performance we're going to see from them moving forward, Dallas is looking like a very scary top 3 team, and that's not good for Optic at all, since they have still not been able to find a way of beating the top level teams in the game.
No, they haven't at all. And this match right here, this was painful to watch. Like Chicago got absolutely dominated in this 3-0. I mean, it was not even remotely close. Um it was an absolute beating. It was an ass beating. And I really think that Chicago has to do something. I don't know what it is, but they couldn't do it on land now. You know, the catch me on land thing didn't work. They did fine in this tournament. It's not like they did awful.
Yeah,
And whenever they rematched Dallas later on, they did fine. You know, it wasn't as bad, but it's still rough.
yeah, it definitely is. I just I don't know what the issues with Chicago at this point. They're another roster, kind of like the Thieves, except they're obvious. I would say they're better than the Thieves. Obviously, just their performances alone speak for that. But you look on paper, you look at the names, you're like, wow, that's a crazy good roster. And then you see them play, and it's not as impressive. So I think they weirdly enough, I like with optic rosters, I just feel like they always rely too much on the slang aspect, and so I feel like a lot of the strategy gets lost
Yeah, I
there.
agree.
But not too much to say. We will see a rematch of that later on into the major. But we'll move on to the last Thursday matchup that happened. It was the New York Subliners going up against Minnesota Rocker. Obviously, New York had Decimate filling in for ASIM since ASIM could not make it to the States in time for that. He is now in the States. Thank the Lord, probably for New York Subliners' chances of moving, I guess, up in the standings to get better seeding for champs. I actually thought they would beat Minnesota here. That was not the case. They lost a pretty swift 3-0 to the Minnesota Rocker. And uh, honestly, I guess that was just how big of a role ASIM plays in this roster. I think if ASIM was there, obviously that would have been an incredibly different story and probably would have been the other lopsided the other way.
Right.
So I think kind of this loss here against Minnesota just spoke to how important of a role and player ASIM is within this roster.
And it wasn't like New York was completely chalked this series. I mean, they yeah, it's so tough to lose something like that. And it's different than like Hook's scenario where um Hook just was negligent. Like it was legitimately another visa issue, and you know it's been really hard on everybody trying to get this year to be a good competitive year. Um, and then to have your route man not be able to show up. I mean, it was nice to see that like Decimate was able to step in and do okay. Um, you know, the 0-3 to Minnesota felt a little bad, but I think they were like it's probably like the first time that they had played search maps together,
Yeah.
and like the respawns. I mean, you still have to figure out how to play with each other, but I mean they did bounce back, and you know they didn't have an awful performance despite the fact that they didn't have one of their players. They did better than LA Thieves, you know, despite being in relatively the similar situation.
Yeah, I think just with a little more time to practice than LA Thieves did, obviously. However, LA Thieves, I guess, have had that guy in the roster at some point. So, apples and oranges, it's whatever. But that was it for the Thursday matchups. We'll move on into Friday matchups. We had Paris Legion going against Seattle Surge. I thought Paris. My predictions were obviously god awful this past major. So hopefully, going into week one of stage five, I'll be back on track with that. But I had Paris beating Seattle. That was not the case. It was a very dominant 3-0 for Seattle Surge over the Paris Legion there. Paris, I they might be making another roster change. I don't know. Nothing's been announced yet, but we'll see. These teams just kind of love to move players around and not give much thought to it, it seems. But their season's over. I mean, both of these teams' seasons are over. They're both outside of the top eight. Neither are going to make it. So it'll be interesting to see how much fire they come into stage five with, if they're just going to kind of, I think would be a huge disservice still to doesn't have as many, but I think Seattle Surge is actually one of the more popular teams in the league, at least fan base wise.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it has been nice seeing Octane kind of be a giant in the playground. This land. Um, he had his way with teams. He had his way. And it was nice to see that like this roster does have the potential to work. Yeah, they beat London. Yeah, they beat Paris, but um, I mean, those are still professional teams with professional players on them. And
Yeah, and I guess we'll talk about that now since they realized they only played one more match. They lost to Chicago. It did go a game 5. It was really close. But that was the end of their land journey there. And I think a lot of this was just like, honestly, there was no difference from online to LAN, realistically. I mean, you had LA Thieves, that was like an outlier. You had Dallas, that was a bit of an outlier. But like outside of, and like I guess New York, but New York, they were missing a player. They
yeah,
were missing a very important player. LA Thieves, they were missing a player as well. They literally had to make a last minute substitution. Draws appear, and then Dallas, you could kind of see the inklings of the clicking throughout the stage that would lead them to this performance. Obviously, I would still say they're overperformed expectations, even with kind of all those pieces clicking, but you could see the makings of it happening throughout the stage. And I think the same thing could be said with Seattle Surge's performance here at this land. They were the I think second seeded or second last place team, or they were the last place, they were last seed or the second to last seed in their group through the stage. However, they did beat Optic Chicago during that stage. So like their performance here, you would expect them to beat London. You might expect them to beat Paris, who they've had a little bit of an issue with. Maybe not as dominantly as they did, but then they had a close series up against Chicago. They had literally just beaten Chicago like what, 2 weeks, a week prior to this major. And I think a lot of it goes into Octane's delusionment, and a lot of the players' delusionment of this drastic difference between LAN and online, when literally all of you guys are in Texas, or at least the majority of you guys are in Texas, on as balanced of server hosts as you. A lot of it, I think, just goes to players' mentality when they're playing in LAN versus playing online.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
think that was one of the reasons you saw Octane perform well, is just that mental aspect of like, oh, this is LAN.
Yeah, but I mean, he was like
Finally,
bodying.
like
Like he was going on
I
tens.
think
He was a
that's I
beast.
honestly think that's how much of a mental aspect it can play for certain players. And I think he even spoke about that in a video sense. I mean, he was obviously very disappointed that they didn't get to make champs, and I think that'll be a discussion that we'll talk about once we wrap up the recap here of the stage 4 major. But uh, like realistically, there was no huge difference in placings, and I honestly just think a lot of it goes to the mental aspect that a lot of these players have.
Yeah, and I will concede that point to a degree because I mean we're both like IT guys. We both can understand if you have a fiber connection between esports facilities that are in Texas, you know, it's not, and you guys are sitting all right next to each other, pinging off the same IP. It's not like this is so much drastically different than putting it all on one router, right? So it's just kind of corny, but um, who knows? You know, maybe like it's uh it's that main stage feel. It's that oh this is real feel. You know, I've never been there, but maybe that is such a psychosomatic effect. You know, you want to perform better because the guys that you're playing against are right next to you. So,
Yeah, yeah, that maybe that's why a team facility can definitely help, because I know for a fact Seattle Surge was not playing out of a team facility as some of the other rosters were. But I guess another topic with this matchup here that Paris lost against Seattle was the monitor discussion,
oh my
because
gosh,
players were playing on different monitors than what they were accustomed to. That to me,
that's some
with the
crybaby
settings,
shit.
yeah, it's obviously not an excuse. It's a very bad one at that. Yes, you have to fiddle with your settings, and they might not be exactly the same. I do also think that that's just poor planning on the CDL's part. Um, Realistically, if you gave them specific monitors and equipment to play with for the online portion of the league, then when they come to land, they should have that exact same equipment. Like that,
Yeah, barring
that's a valid complaint there.
barring personal peripherals
Yes,
like
barring personal
controllers. Yeah,
yes, yes, obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up since I saw that. I'm like, really, dude? But
yeah,
I do think that within that there is a valid complaint there that the CDL can do something better in
yeah.
that.
It's only $300 million. I'm sure you can figure out how to get the same damn monitors and 8 of them.
Yeah,
It's not even like you've already given like well countless monitors out because I'm sure all the sub players um, have monitors and PCs given to them by the league in order to make sure that we can
yeah,
maintain some semblance of competitive integrity in PC COD. Um,
yeah. And I think they were different from the warm up facility to the stage too. It was another issue.
yeah, it's just yeah, I like the consistency. It's I would hate to like change cleats, from warm up to game time. But at the end of the day, like, does it really matter that much? No.
No, I
It's
think it's just a little added pressure slash time constraint since you have to modify your settings to try and get them to how you want them again.
right.
But outside of that, I don't think there's like obviously it's not an excuse to lose, but I do think it is a valid complaint, and so I think that's all I wanted to say with that. So with that, we'll move on to our other Friday matchup. It was Florida Mutineers versus LAG. Florida, they beat LAG 3-1. That is to be expected, I do think. And with this, LAG make a roster change. They take out Sheen and they bring in Mental. Finally, they finally bring in Mental. And I know I said, oh yeah, thing. Well, it's been a lot longer than a month, but he's finally in the starting lineup. And yeah, it does not look too good. They lost what? They lost 8-0 or 0-8 to their academy squad, which has Chino in it. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that's what I want to talk about with all of this, right? So like yes, they made a roster change finally. Um and is it the right roster change? I
does not look like it.
I cannot confidently say that it is. I think that um I think that it's one of those things that you got to play around, you got to figure it out. But LAG, they're what? They're the ninth place team, correct? Or the eighth place team? Let's see. Call of Duty
I
League rank.
believe they're the ninth. They're definitely not top eight. That would be it's gonna be Florida, I think, is top eight. Is the eighth place. So LAG is the ninth, and then I believe London is 10th and Seattle's 11th, tied with Paris or something along those lines. I'm not too sure. It's something along those lines.
So the Call of Duty League standings are right now LAG is in ninth, and they are 70 points away from the Mutineers. I think the top 8 are secured as long as the Mutineers don't or they don't win a single game moving forward. If the Mutineers don't win any games moving forward, and I think if the LA Gorillas they don't have to win every game moving forward, but they have to get somewhere. 70 points is still kind of a big gap. FaZe is I think they've already secured the number 1 spot
Yeah,
because
they
they're
have.
they're like beyond far that like they're it's kind of nuts. We'll talk about that I'm sure later. Um but yeah, like these bottom teams they're basically screwed. So, yeah, get mental in there, focus on content, all that stuff. Like they've got a good academy team, they've got good players that they're
Well, their
training up.
academy team's looking like it's better than their pro team.
Yeah.
So,
So,
are
we'll
we
see.
looking at a probable full rebuild of this LA Gorilla squad once again moving into next year? It's
Uh,
quite possible. They might keep maybe one or two players. Like maybe they'll keep Mental. I don't know. Maybe that's why they're testing the waters here in the Pro League to see how he can stack up and improve throughout the last stage, since it's pretty much guaranteed at this point they're not going to champs. I'm just gonna say it's guaranteed they're not going to champs.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
yeah, maybe they're
The Mental idea is not bad because Mental brings in a brand new crowd of people that his fan base, right? Like
yeah.
he, for those that are unaware, Mental is the Gears of War GOAT. He's the greatest Gears of War player of all time. He's like Crim Six for Gears of War. Um,
Maybe
and
even more impressive than Crim
yeah,
Six, since
yeah. I mean, this
he
dude's
very rarely loses.
literally built different in Gears. Um, so he comes over to COD because, I mean, there's a franchise league versus Gears of War, which, I mean, there's a lot of problems in that esports space, and I mean, it's not like it's a bad game or anything like that, and it's not like it's not entertaining to watch, but there's a lot of problems in that space. So,
There's not as much money involved.
oh, absolutely not. So you come to COD, you say, all right, let's compete, let's try to figure this out here. Changing in a game at the highest level would be crazy, ludicrous for anybody to do. But Call of Duty has that quite often. We have quite a few ex Halo pro players like Formal and Enable and Havoc,
Crim
um,
Six.
Crim6. I mean, there's quite a few Halo guys from back in the day that have been successful because I mean, at the end of the day, it is a shooter. You still like there's still things that are
Yeah.
just universally good in a shooter. If you can shoot them better than they can shoot you, you're probably gonna be okay. And
Yours is a bit further from COD since it is third person.
it's third person, and it's got a crazy wild movement system. Um, it's just a different game, right? It will be nice to see where Mental stacks up against some pro players, but like I said, I think this is more for a let's build the fan base of LAG up and get him some playing time because we're kind of screwed anyway. I think that's really what's happened. Like LAG is 8-20 in the league. Match wins versus match lost.
Yeah.
So, or sorry, it matches, not maps, matches. 8-20. So, at this point, you're just riding the wave. You're saying, you know, hey, let's just throw shit at the wall, hope it'll stick. There's just no hope for them. Build your brand, build your content. Just like I said for the Ravens, Paris, they can feel free to get on that at any time. Seattle would be great for that, and I don't understand why they refuse to do that. All the bottom teams, they're. I think it's finally safe to say that they've submitted their positions, and now they need to focus on other things. So I think this is the other things for LAG.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point to bring up there for this LAG squad. But with that being said, I think we'll move on to our next Friday matchup. It was Toronto going up against Empire. This was a really fun and close
Banger!
game series.
Banger! This was the best game of the entire. I don't even care about the grand finals being 5-4. This was the best game. Like this came down to I saw it, Nick. The game 5, round 11. Vivid was on the bomb diffusing. He had maybe 0.02 seconds left.
It was such a cool Moscow S&D to watch
Yeah.
because there was so much back and forth and baiting of like, oh, you saw me do this, well then we're gonna do a full rotation to this bomb site, and then we're actually gonna fake doing that full rotation and go back. Like there was just so much mind game S&D, and it was like that's the stuff like Toronto, time and time again, man. You looked at at first it was their control, where you're just like, oh, finally a team that can play control intelligently and calmly. And then you move, and then they give us this in S&D, this just beautiful display of of strategy inside of the S&D, and it went all the way to game 5 round 11. It was just so good. So Toronto is like, honestly, everyone hated Toronto after last season, but man, I'm liking, at least me. I don't know about the players and how they play the game. It's a lot of fun to watch their matches.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was really interesting to watch the Apocalypse in this series as well. Um, just because they had giant point swings throughout it. I mean, we're talking like 50, 60 point swings. Toronto, like Insight was, I think he had like less than 10 limbs and like 2.5 minutes of hill time on that Apocalypse, and it was just a wild, wild time. That was such a weird, like this was such a fantastic series to watch for anybody who is a true fan of CDL, because this was a absolute nail biter in every single map. Every single map that they played, it could have gone either way. And I mean, GG's to Toronto for pulling it out, but I mean, we'll see later on that it short lived.
Yeah, unfortunately, but the last Friday matchup that we did have, it was Atlanta FaZe up against Minnesota. I predicted this was going to be a 3-0, except I said it was going to be against New York. It was against Minnesota. Like, Atlanta's just good. We'll move on to
Yep.
Saturday. I
Atlanta's built different.
Yeah, Atlanta's built different. So Saturday we saw the likes of the New York Subliners take on Florida, and this series honestly probably saved Decimate's reputation as a player. Obviously, he came into Seattle like for a stage, if that, and then
Yeah.
he decided probably lowered his stock quite a bit, especially people's opinions on him as a player. Him filling in for this New York Subliners roster probably upped it quite a bit, and honestly probably saved his career as a player, since I mean they came here up against Florida, him subbing in, barely a week of practice going in. They lose 3-0 to Minnesota, and then they come in here, win both S&Ds up against Florida to take the series 3-2.
Yeah, this was a nut series as well, like it's frustrating being a Florida fan knowing that this is most definitely a winnable game, knowing that a team wasn't there. Um, it Losing it in the round in the game 5 is just so Florida, honestly. It really is. Like New York would be the equivalent of like a bad team at this point. Not saying anything bad about Decimate, but they just don't have the type of practice that Florida has. And Florida looked really good against LAG. They looked fine against New York as well. They just couldn't finish.
Yeah,
And
they couldn't win the S&Ds.
it's not like it really matters because they're far enough ahead that um they'll be fine in champs. Their spot is secured. Um but they really got to figure this out, it's very wishy-washy. They're very inconsistent. You know, they can beat some of these high-level teams and surprise. So it's not that, we have to watch out for that kind of stuff. The biggest thing is um the biggest thing in my opinion is we like the Florida Mutineers have to figure out consistency. That's what's screwing them right now more than anything else. It's just they show up one day and they're beast, and they show up the next day and they're ass. And I mean, GG's to New York and everything like that. Like I said, it was kind of short lived. Um, but Florida should not have lost that. I'm just gonna say that right now. Florida shouldn't have lost that, and they lost it. So
Yeah. Um, with that, we'll move on to our Saturday matchup. We already kind of briefly talked about this, but it was Chicago versus Seattle Surge. This time, Chicago got revenge during, I believe it was Shipwrecks in the game 5 and proceed on in the tournament. The other Saturday matchup that followed that, it was Dallas going up against New York Subliners. Dallas honestly had been looking on point this kind of entire weekend, and so they were able to relatively easily dispatch the New York Subliners 3-1 in that series. Actually not rounding out the Saturday because there are 5 matches, but the second to last match on Saturday, we saw the likes of Chicago take on the Minnesota Rocker, and Chicago was able to dispatch them, knocking them out of the tournament 3-1. So New York left the tournament on Saturday there, as well as Minnesota. New York, they get ASIM back. Be interesting to see how they're able to bounce back after that unfortunate, I guess, result
They
at
didn't look bad
unfortunate
against
but
Dallas.
expected result.
They
No, they didn't
didn't.
look bad.
They
It
didn't
was
look
3-1.
bad. I mean, yeah, no ASIM, decimated in, no practice, basically. Coming off hot against a Florida win, tight Florida win, but a Florida win. Um, Dallas, I mean, to pull a map off of Dallas in this kind of state, it makes you think, makes you wonder. Um, and I'm hopeful for New York moving forward. This
Yeah.
major really meant nothing for New York. Like if they had lost against
I mean,
Florida, no,
I think it meant quite a bit for like the standings. I guess
sure,
your opinion on them, it didn't mean a lot, but for the standings, it's a super tight race between Dallas, Toronto, and New York now for that second place spot.
that is true. That is true. And I mean, they're all looking really, really good. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And I think that this has been a very competitive year. Um,
100%. At least for the top 8 teams, it's
yes.
been a pretty competitive year. The bottom 4, maybe not so much, but I guess, is there anything that you wanted to talk about with Minnesota? Since, I mean, this was the stage where they brought in Major Maniac, they took out accuracy, and honestly, I feel like they find themselves in kind of the same spot
Yeah, it was
as
definitely a lateral
they
move.
found themselves in all season.
I mean, Standy is still great. Don't get me wrong. He's still a fantastic player. Um, Attach and Standy work really well together,
I
and
believe they're actually moving Attach to a flex, and they're moving Priesta to SMG.
that would be kind of interesting because last time Priesta played a lot of sub was BO4, if I recall correctly, where he was the Crash Sog for phase. Um, or not for phase, for 100 Thieves.
I thought he
Um,
was grapple.
yeah, or not Crash
Enable
Sog.
was,
Ruin Sog. You're right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Enable was Crash Sog. So, and he's fine. He was a crack player for them and everything like that, and maybe that'll work. And 74U is kind of a free gun. Think of the Krig. Most of those guns are kind of free right now. It's they're pretty good. So, um, I don't know. I like the idea of changing Priest over to a sub player. He's good, and I don't think he's the problem ever. Um, Major Maniac versus accuracy. It's just you've got to figure out how to work with either of them, and both of them pose their own challenges. Of like Major Maniac, for example, will just solo push a bomb hill. He just does that, and it's not necessarily the end of the world in 4v4 COD, but that in itself can pose problems. And Lamar plays really, really, really slow. He's the anchor AR, and in a game where the respawns are very high paced, you can't always play that slow. And I think that's what they're starting to see. I honestly, they're kind of interchangeable. It really, like I said, they both have their pros and cons. They both shoot well. It's not like either of them are terrible players by any right, but it's going to be like minor adjustments from here on out for all of the teams, and I think that's something that Minnesota is also going to be looking at. So,
Yeah. But that's gonna actually no, sorry, we have one more Saturday matchup. It was Atlanta going up against Toronto Ultra. Atlanta, they were beat the Ultra 3-1 there, letting them advance to the grand finals. first Sunday matchup that we did have, it was a rematch from Thursday. Once again, it was Dallas going up the Chicago Optic lineup, and Dallas was able to beat them 3-1 this time. It's a bit closer, however, Dallas still reigned supreme there. I think probably the more interesting matchups on that Sunday were the next two. It was a rematch, Toronto versus Dallas. However, this time Dallas was able to come out on top 3-2, taking, I believe, a round 5 S&D game
Yeah.
5 to win it. I think that was very unfortunate because I do think that should have gone to a round 11. But I can't remember who it was in the back, but they stopped shooting when they could have had a two-piece on some of the players because he was able to get behind them. It was at the B-bomb site. There were 2 players by that back window. He wrapped down from P2 staircase and shot and killed one of them, but there were 2 there, and he had stopped shooting and was able to get cleaned up before he could dispatch that. If he had done that, it would have been, I believe, a 2v1 or something with bomb down, and I think they realistically would have won that round unless that other player clutched up, which was possible, but bit unfortunate scenario there from Toronto. And I think that was probably one of the only times I've seen Toronto show some nerves was that situation right there where the player stopped shooting. But Toronto still looking really solid, really scary. And Dallas, they were able to make it all the way to the grand finals once again, or actually for the first time since stage 1, they're in a grand finals. However, they find themselves short up against Atlanta once again here. However, this time it went all the way to a game 9. So it was incredibly, incredibly long series. Dallas played like 7+ hours of COD that day or something. And for anyone that says, oh, starting in the grand finals don't give you an advantage, dude, that map veto advantage is 100% why Atlanta won this series up against the Dallas Empire. Because if any one of Dallas's other maps, good maps, were able to get through, Dallas would have taken this series. And I think limiting it to 2 best of 5s benefits those teams that have a strong small map pool, but not a strong large map pool like Atlanta does. And this series is actually pretty crazy because Dallas was able to beat Atlanta on Moscow S&D, the first S&D loss on that map Atlanta has had all season, and Dallas was able to take it off of them. Obviously, you can still talk about momentum, and I'm glad Atlanta won here in the grand finals, beating Dallas Empire. Otherwise, we would have never heard the end of it from the players of like, oh, all the momentum people pick up throughout the earlier wins. Yes, I can agree with some of that. And I do think that Atlanta should play a competitive match on Sunday as well. But
honestly,
yeah,
nobody's surprised at this point. Atlanta is so far ahead, and they have been so successful with 30 match wins and only 4 match losses. I mean, it was kind of the writing was on the wall. You know, your usual predictions for majors are let's just say that Atlanta FaZe wins it all and figure out the rest from there. And it's a pretty good strategy considering that they've won most of them.
I'm 3 for 4.
Yeah. So, and Atlanta FaZe is also 3 for 4. They're truly just built completely and utterly different. The way they play the game is different than the way anybody else plays the game. They don't even bother to set up for new hard points. They just break into the new hard point and they just say this is our time now and good luck figuring it out from there. They're absolute menaces in search. They play flawlessly with good team chemistry. Every single one of their players is in their own right a superstar in the league. And it shows. I mean, we talk about this being the most competitive year for Call of Duty, but it's really the most competitive year for second place. FaZe is just, I don't even know if they'll ever be stopped.
Oh, don't jinx them. Don't jinx them. They still got this major and they still got champs. Dallas is looking pretty strong, and we know what happened. They were making a lot of grand finals, but they weren't winning as many of them last season.
True.
But Dallas was kind of they weren't that close until the end of the season where they made it to champs and they were just able to display another level of Call of Duty. And that's also something we saw from the old OGLA roster, now LA Thieves roster. So maybe Slasher will pull a miracle out of his ass once again and come champs and be able to make it all the way to like fourth place or third place. Who knows? Obviously, this year's a lot more competitive, but he's been able to do it in past titles. Maybe he'll be able to do this. That's getting ahead of ourselves. That's still a little over a month away,
True.
and so we'll focus on the Stage 5 major. But before that, I do want to bring back the conversation of champs, since this was something that was circulating once again. It was 8-team champs versus 12-team champs. And I 100% agree. Bottom four, they should not make it to champs. We've had this huge, long, extended regular season, and for that to like decide on the seeding for champs. So for that reason, yes, I 100% agree. Bottom four should not make champs. It just makes it a lot uglier, I think, if you include those bottom four teams, even if you were to start them in losers bracket. However, I do hope that since it is an 8-team champs, that we don't have like the top two teams start in elevated position. Since we only have 8 teams there, I think it should just be first seed versus eighth seed, second versus seventh, third versus sixth, fourth versus fifth, and just have that as a double elimination bracket. I think that's how you should do it. Since you only have 8 teams there, they split very equally into four matches, into four team versus team matches. I don't think the first seed and the second seed should start a winner's round ahead of the rest of the pack. That doesn't make any sense. It just makes it way more confusing. So I think that's the format they 100% should go with. And if they don't, honestly, I have no clue what the fuck is wrong with the CDL.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that, well, yeah, you have to have expansion at this point. If expansion doesn't happen, like there are going to be some serious repercussions from that. There are going to be some serious consequences. You have to expand next year. There are so many organizations chomping at the bit, ready to go. Like look at the 100 Thieves. Like they bent over backwards to try and get the Thieves back into this. Um, and I respect them for that, but it wouldn't have been a problem if they had just been like, all right, expansion time, you know. So, E United, I'm sure, would want to put forth a team. Um, you've got orgs like Gen.G or G2 or C9, or, you've got all of these other orgs that could, they could figure out a $25 million entry fee and get into the league. Um, if they get to 16, the problem with getting rid of the bottom teams would be irrelevant, you know. Um, and I think that you could do almost like a conference-based thing. You could have 8 teams in one conference and 8 teams in the other conference, and you could have a more fleshed out regular season based on those, and then have a playoff that starts in like an Eastern or Western Conference bracket, like traditional
Yeah, you
sports.
could even do a pool play for champs as well, where you align the teams by their seeding into pools or whatnot.
Right.
Then the top 2 teams from each pool go into a bracket and then double them from there. And since obviously we're not having challengers teams in this, I 100% think we need expansion. But I do think that it would be cool to a lot of people have been talking about this, how to include the challengers team, since it is kind of sad that we don't get to see them play up against some of these squads. Is that concept of a World Cup similar to how like you have one for Overwatch, or I don't know of anything else, but I mean Blizzard already has that Overwatch World Cup thing where they are able to bring in a bunch of I guess less established players and kind of have a fun competition, and it's more like a celebration, since that's kind of the key word that people were throwing around with champs in the past. It's that it was more of like a celebration of Call of Duty, since it didn't have like as high of a competitive aspect. And so I think that could be something really fun to have and bring in like the Japanese teams, the Australian teams, Spanish teams, the
Yeah,
German teams, the Italian teams, um, the French teams, since I think those are like kind of some of the most of the major ones. The Mexico and Brazil, since I believe they also have a relatively strong Call of Duty scene. But yeah, I think there's a bunch of really good ideas in way floating around in ways that we can include some of these smaller regions to really kind of have a fun event where they get to be included in it.
yeah, I would love to see more inclusion of pro-ams, and you brought up the Japanese COD. That kind of blew up over on Twitter in the past week or so. Um, Turns out it's kind of a wild ride to hear people screaming in Japanese about Call of Duty, and it's entertaining, that's for sure. So,
Yeah, City of New York,
yeah.
popping off with those crazy raid spots.
Oh my gosh. That was a
Dude's just peeking through the blinds,
yeah.
peeking through the curtains, looking at that bomb site, dude. I guarantee you, everyone's like, delete the VOD, delete the VOD.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
uh,
we're gonna see that from Temp and Champs. No, just kidding. Temp is not gonna be able to make Champs, but that would be something.
Cellium at
Yep,
champs.
Cellium. Cellium at
Or
Champs is
or
gonna be
Illy.
Pikachu.
Illy had some crazy spots last champs in TFT, I
Dashy,
remember.
Dashy usually has some wild spots. I wish they bring
Yeah.
back snipers for Champs. That would be fun. Snipers and smokes.
Last event of the year, they just bring in snipers.
I mean, last event of
Oh,
the year, last year they made a drastic nerf to the MP5, and pros were just like,
yeah, they did.
"What? Well, what do we do now?" Like mid champs, mid
Yeah,
champs.
that was interesting. But oh yeah, dude, the World Cup or the Call of Duty World Cup, if there were to do something like that, just allow everything. Just allow everything.
Yeah.
Complete chaos because it's just supposed to be fun. Who
Right.
cares? Everything, no GAs, nothing. I know Clayster would like that because he's always been someone that proudly preaches we should just use fucking everything and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I could not agree more. We just need to get more people like Clayster in the league, I think, so that that
Well,
can happen.
Clayster's an old head, and I think that he's very, very unique. I don't think there's ever going to be another Clayster again. So,
We'll see. I'll just have to get really, really good at Call of Duty and join the league, and then you can have two somewhat like-minded individuals, maybe.
yeah, you'll have to play a lot of Call of Duty. I'm sure your job would not like
Yeah,
that.
that's not happening. It's not happening, but can dream. But what we won't be dreaming about is what will be happening in a week's time with the Stage 5 Week 1 matches. So we'll jump into the predictions there. So kicking it off, we have London versus Atlanta. I think that's a very easy decision there. Is Atlanta's going to absolutely body London Royal Ravens, and I'm going to get the coin flip up for that. But obviously, I'm going to assume you're in agreement. The coin is going to go on Defiance. It's saying London's going to pull some absolute miracle out of its ass and beat Atlanta FaZe. But are you in agreement? Atlanta FaZe over London?
I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I think yeah, you're gonna agree with me, but you never know. Maybe you're deciding to go spicy.
No, that is not even spicy. That is just blasted. Um, yeah, no, there's no world where FaZe doesn't win that.
Okay. All right. Well, the next match is going to be Paris versus Chicago. I'm going to say that's going to be a 3-1 victory for Chicago over the Paris Legion. And I think you're probably going to be in agreement there that it's going to be a Chicago win as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to him 3-1 as well.
Okay, the coin's going to go with Chicago, so we're in agreement there. Coin's still on its way, road back to 50-50. I think it's a little higher than 50% right now, or maybe it's a little lower since it did have a pretty bad week, but I'm not too sure there. I think it's a little higher. Moving on to Friday, we have Minnesota versus LAG. I think this should probably be a pretty easy Minnesota win over the LA Gorillas. In the past, I might not have said it was, but with how poorly LAG's been in scrims, and I don't think Minnesota's going to get any worse than they are. I think they're just kind of going to stagnate. as they have been kind of throughout the whole season. I'm just going to say it's probably going to be a relatively easy 3-1 over LA Gorillas, maybe even a 3-0 in all honesty there. But I see you're actually thinking it's going to a game 5. So
Yeah, I mean, you usually like get a little bit of a honeymoon, and we'll figure it out from there. And Minnesota's also trying to figure it out, so I do think that Minnesota will get the win at the end, but I think it'll just come down to just the fact that they have a little bit more experience in search. Um,
yeah,
I
LAG, they haven't been looking like they're honeymooning so far. So we'll
yeah.
have to see if one comes around. But the last Friday matchup that we do have, it's going to be New York versus the LA Thieves. And this is honestly probably going to be, for me, New York's scariest matchup since they just did get ASIM. He's not playing in Canada anymore. He's down there in Dallas with the squad. And he hasn't been able to practice with them. Or he lost a week of practice with the squad in scrims. They've been getting bodied, but this for me is going to be New York's probably shakiest matchup as they get they've had 2 weeks to kind of reassimilate with Asim after that like week off from him. Um, that is a good amount of time, but still, like for me, this is going to be probably New York's scariest match since it's going to be their first official match back with Asim. After that, I think they're probably going to not coast through their group because it is a really difficult group. Obviously, they have Atlanta in there, but and they do have Chicago, who's still a solid team. Uh, but yeah, for this is probably going to be New York Subliner's shakiest matchup. With that being said, though, I'm going to give it to them in the end, but I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-2. I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-2. I think it could get a little scary for New York there down the line, but in the end, I think they'll be able to pull out the dub.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, I'm ready to move on to the next one.
Next one, it's going to be a short one. It's going to be Paris versus the Atlanta FaZe. That's a swift 3-0. Atlanta take that over Paris. The next one, this is going to be a bit more of an interesting matchup potentially. We do have Seattle Surge going up against Florida Mutineers. Florida, they still have something to play for. Seattle Surge, not so much. However, Seattle, I think, has had Florida's number through most of the season since they do like to usually avoid them in the group play. But I think I'm going to have to give it to Florida 3-1 over Seattle. Simply because I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of fire coming out of this Seattle Surge lineup since they realistically can't make champs anymore. I know the percentage is not zero, and that Nubsy said we're not going to stop until that percentage is zero. However, after losing to Chicago and seeing like tweets of saying, "Man, I wish there were 12 teams of champs," it seems like their mindset is already that they're kind of out, and so they'll probably come in to this stage 5 a little bit more deflated than usual, especially since they're back at online too. That's always something else.
Right, that
But I
is
see
true.
you're giving it to Seattle.
I am, and it's because this is a game that Florida normally loses, and not only that, Seattle is living under this impression that if they win every single game and Florida loses every single game, then Seattle potentially has a chance to go to champs. It's not set in stone, but like thinking of that and thinking of the psychology behind that and the mentality, I would imagine that Seattle, at any given time, are going to try way harder whenever they need to make sure they don't lose to Florida. Otherwise, it's literally chalked at that point. So I'm going to give it to Seattle just because it this seems like a game that Florida will lose anyway, and there's got to be some upsets. But I mean, we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, the coin's going to agree with you. It's going to go with Seattle. Moving on to our last Saturday matchup, though, it's going to be another pretty easy prediction one. Dallas versus the LA Gorillas. I'm going 3-0. You're going 3-0. The coin, you know what? It's going Dallas. We'll just say it's going 3-0 as well. And we'll move on to Sunday, where we have the London Royal Ravens going up against the LA Thieves. Now, this could be an interesting one because, at least as Abizi is saying, LA Thieves are looking like shit in scrims. London, they obviously did not look too good at that major, and they still have a lot of things to work through and improve upon. So I don't know honestly what to think here. However, I'm going to have more faith in LA Thieves. That is a faith that has time and time again been trounced upon by this team. I just never learned my lesson. Apparently, I just enjoy the pain. But I'm gonna give it to LA Thieves in the end. Game 5, London has no ice. I'm gonna agree with you. LA Thieves clutch up in the end.
Yeah, London. That is like their crux. Is they have literally zero ice in the game five. I don't know. I want to know the statistic behind this.
They have one Game 5 win.
One game five win. I wonder how many they had in Modern Warfare as well, because it probably wasn't that many either.
I
So
think it was like 3, maybe. I don't know.
yeah, so
It was not a lot. The Coin's gonna disagree though. Coin's got its London boys back. Thinks they got the ice, so it's gonna take them. But next Sunday matchup, it's going to be Battle of the North. Once again, we have Toronto going up against Minnesota. Toronto's just been really solid. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go 3-1 Toronto over the Minnesota Rocker. Toronto, they're not switching anything up. They can just keep on keeping on. They realistically just got to beat Dallas and then perform well at the major to secure that second seed going into champs, since I believe I think there's I think they're either 5 points behind Dallas or 5 points ahead of Dallas. I can't remember, but I mean, there's literally like 10 points separating Dallas, Toronto, and New York. They're all clumped together, so they're definitely gonna try and be on their A game and pull out the dub here against a team that they realistically should beat in the Minnesota Rocker. Coin's gonna agree. Coins going Toronto. We just wrapped up the Battle of the North. Now we're going back to the Battle of the Pizzas. We got the New York Subliners going up against Chicago Optic, and you're giving it to New York 3-1 over Chicago Optic.
yeah, I mean, I think the subliners are gonna hit the ground running. They're definitely like the better team, just in general. And then I don't know. I imagine that Chicago is just they're still like struggling to find an identity, and I really don't think that they can beat top teams like the Subliners. So I really am giving this to New York. I see you're giving it to Chicago though.
I'm giving it to Chicago game 5. I don't like Chicago deep dish pizza. I do think New York would win this matchup. Uh, it's just a little inkling, I have this weird feeling that maybe Chicago can actually pull this victory over New York Subliners. And
Yeah,
the coin went with New York as well, and I gotta disagree with the coin, I think here. I gotta widen the gap,
true.
We're still pretty neck and neck, I believe, in our predictions. I think you're still maybe like one prediction ahead of me or something from the preseason matches, maybe two. And I gotta close that gap. The
That's true.
season, it's almost over. I gotta pull out the dub here. I can't end on even notes. I gotta be at least one win ahead so I can have bragging rights moving into the next season.
That's true. But I mean, I don't know. I
It
think
could
this is
backfire. It could
I think this is
backfire.
gonna be a backfire. I mean, like I said,
I
Seattle
mean,
over
you
Florida, but
you said Seattle over Florida, but you've been way more correct on the Florida losses and victories than I have.
I
So
just I
maybe I'll get this Chicago one here, or maybe you're just gonna pull further ahead
maybe.
in the predictions.
At the end of the
But
day,
I
it's
do I
just.
saw
Oh yeah, I saw that too.
I saw it in the Excel sheet you had London 3-0 over Atlanta. I'm like, I know you're not that crazy, so I'll
No,
switch that back for
yeah,
you.
that
3-0
was
Atlanta over London.
that was
Little
a
typo
mistake.
there. But so we're disagreeing on 2 matches here. Everything else we've agreed upon. The only ones we're disagreeing on is the Battle of the Sea Creatures with Seattle versus Florida, and then the Battle of the Pizzas with New York versus Chicago.
Right.
There's a little differences there with the coin, but I feel pretty good with these predictions overall. I think most of these matches are pretty straightforward. There's a couple there where maybe we'll see it different, and obviously there's always upsets every single week where it's just like, well, I didn't see that coming. But
Yeah, I think that I'm excited to see Call of Duty come back. Ready to watch
yeah,
some more
it's been a
CDL.
while.
Has in fact been a while. So I will um, be patiently waiting for Thursday, and hopefully we get some good COD coming into Stage 5. Almost
Yeah,
done.
I do think I think it's going to be a good week outside of some of the Saturday matchups that are going to be a snooze fest. But I think outside of that, Thursday's got, well, maybe Thursday don't got some. But Sunday, Sunday's got some good matches. We'll just say that Sunday at least has some good matches. But that's going to be it from us here. I hope you guys all had a fantastic weekend. I hope you guys all have a fantastic week moving forward with these matches of Call of Duty that we have lined up here. But that is going to be it from us. So we will see you guys next time.
Later.